Hello, 6th grade. Welcome to your help video for our first lesson on probability. It's all about the language of probability using these words up here at the top. So there's impossible, unlikely, even, likely, and certain. And a big thing that I want you to see is that some of these values mean a specific number. So impossible has to be 0 or a decimal of 0.0 or a percentage of 0%. Even must be exactly 0.5, 1/2, or 50%. And certain has to be 100% or a whole or the decimal 1.0. But these ones in between don't have to be. So unlikely spans everything in between 0% and 50%. And likely spans everything between 50% and 100%. Right? So it's the ends and the middle that have to be exact, but unlikely and likely are somewhere in the middle. All right, so down for questions 1 through 5, you have to use those words. Impossible and likely as not, or equal, likely, or certain. Here, I'm going to zoom in and put this here, even, equal, as likely as not. These all mean the same thing. Okay, so let's look over here at the spinner. There's blue, 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 blue. Wow, that's a lot of blue. I'm going to highlight blue so I can be sure how many there are. It looks like there are 4 blue and there is 1 red. Right, so let's do that one red. Here we go. Red. Not the world's best red color, but you get the idea. So I have to use those words to describe each of these things. So there's the very first one says landing on blue. Well, I notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sectors or sections. And how many of them are blue? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Get rid of those so they don't get in the way for the next one. So I write 4 out of 5 equals, I can put that in my calculator. Oops. 4 divided by 5 gives me the decimal 0 and 8/10. And remembering that if I want to take a decimal and make it be a percent, it's helpful to put in the extra 0, or you can just multiply by 100. You'll end up getting the same thing. So that's 80%. So if it's 80%, looking up here on my graph, it looks like 80% would go right about here. Right, so that would be 80%, which means the word that I would want would be likely. Okay, if we look at the next one, it says landing on green. Uh-oh, there's no green. So that would be the fraction 0 out of 5. You can put that in your calculator if you need to. 0 divided by 5 is 0. Right? And if I multiply by 100, it's still going to be 0%. Because it's impossible. Looking up here, it is impossible. And why is it impossible? Because there is no green on that spinner. Right, so that's how you do the first section. The next section says to write each probability as a decimal and fraction. So the very first probability says 10% chance. So I'm going to write 10% equals 10 over 100, which also equals 1 over 10. And putting that into my calculator, 1 divided by 10 is 0 and 1/10. Okay, so make sure that you try to simplify those fractions. That's that next section. And then down on the bottom, compare the probabilities. So you're going to use this table here. Are you more likely to win a color TV or a watch? So here's the color TV, and here's the watch. So which one is more? The color TV. So I'm going to write color TV, and then in parentheses, I'm going to say that was 17%. 17% is greater than 13%. Okay, so that's how you do 9, 10, and 11. For the next section, it wants you to rewrite as a decimal and percent. So this time the probability is a fraction, 4/5. So I can write 4/5 as a decimal. Oops, is 4 divided by 5, gets me 0 and 8/10. Remembering that I can just throw in a 0 at the end for 2 digits, or I can multiply by 100. Gets me to 80%. Should be a pretty big number. 4 is almost 5. They're pretty close. So that's how you do 6 and 7. And then that gets you to 8, 9, and 10. These ones are tricky. What you're going to notice is when you look at this table, they're not all set up the same. They're not all fractions. They're not all decimals. They're not all percents. I think it makes a lot of sense to change them into all the same thing, right? So let's do that. I think it's really easy when they look like percents, so I'm going to leave these alone. So now for 3/8, I'm going to make this be a percent. Right. 3 divided by 8 gives me this. Remember, that's not 375%. We want 2 digits in the decimal, 0.375. If there was no 5, it would be 37%, which means as a percent, we just need to move the decimal behind the 7 and get rid of those first ones. So 3/8 is 37.5%. I think this makes a lot of sense. 3 is almost half of 8, and 50% means half, right? So for the next one, 0.025, remember, if it was just 0.02, it would pretty obviously be 2%. So I'm going to write 2 and then put a decimal point, and then behind that 2 was a 5%. Oof, that's a really small percent. And then the next one, 1 divided by 5, right, is 0.2. You will need to change that into a percent. Be careful on that one. Once they're all percents, you can compare them. So let's look at number 9, because I have both of those numbers. We're going to look at green and purple. So green, we may be 2.5%, and purple is down here at 10%. So which one is more likely? It's got to be purple. Purple, because 10% is greater than, what do we say, 2.5%, I think? 2.5%. When you check your answers with the answer key, if there's any that you're not getting correct, please make sure that you are checking in with your friends who understand what they're doing, or you're checking in with me. Right? We can figure this out. Don't just copy down my answers. Good luck.